I don't remember how I got the suit on. Not in any clear, linear way. It's as if the moment I spoke, the moment I gave that answer, the one who stays, something shut off behind my eyes, and when the power came back on, the world was different. Dimmer. Hotter. More compressed. And the suit was on me. Not like clothes. Not like a disguise. Like I'd grown into it, or it had grown into me. The zipper was gone. There was no seam. No give in the fabric. The inside was damp and pulsing. My arms were heavier. My legs didn't bend right. The eye holes were smeared with something that distorted my vision, not blinding, just enough to make everything feel like I was underwater. But the worst part, the part that made my bowels clench and my heart thud like a rotten drum, was the muffling. I couldn't hear myself breathe. I could feel my chest rising and falling, I could feel the air move, but no sound reached me. My ears were packed with a warm, squishy silence that vibrated slightly, like there was a low-grade hum running through my skull. The world was outside the suit now. And I was inside. The audience didn't look at me. They were still gathered around the trough, their bodies moving in mechanical jolts, their hands scooping the foul mixture into distorted mouths. It wasn't food. It didn't nourish. It maintained. The way gas keeps an engine running even if it's leaking and on fire. And then, from the ceiling, the lights shifted. Cool white changed to hot yellow. A klaxon sounded, low, stretched, and thick with static. A message followed, as cheerful as ever: final call for dress rehearsal. Performers, please report to Stage B. That's Stage B, for all performers still trapped in flesh identities. Please bring your best smiles. A door opened behind me. Not a real door. Just a seam in the wall that hissed and peeled back, revealing another corridor. This one wasn't breathing. It watched. I could feel it, like the hallway had eyes. I didn't want to go. Every step toward it made the suit tighten. Not painfully, just enough to remind me I wasn't in charge anymore. But I couldn't stop walking. It wasn't a compulsion in the sense that my legs moved without me. It was worse. It was that I wanted to see what was next. Even if it killed me. Even if it made me less. The hallway twisted. Sloped downward. Fluorescent lights blinked in a rhythm too regular to be accidental. Each flicker gave me a flash of something, a mural here, a dirty mask there, blood, and I'm sure it was blood, in the shape of cartoon footprints. The deeper I went, the warmer it got, until it felt like the suit was soaking wet again, like I was walking in someone's sweat. Then, music. Not from a speaker. From everywhere. Dripping in from the walls. A jingle. Not happy. Not quite. Just upbeat enough to sound insane in this setting. Musical note: come on down to Funtime Park, where dreams are fed and bones will spark. Join the fun, don't run away, you'll never leave, you're here to stay. Musical note: it was wrong. The rhyme was wrong. The tune was sickly sweet and offbeat, like it had been slowed down and reversed and then played back through a child's mouth. It got louder the closer I got to the end of the hallway, until the walls began to vibrate with it. And when I reached the end, another door. Red this time. Painted with a giant smiling mouth and the words, "Welcome to Stage Beta, your big debut." The handle wasn't a handle. It was a hand. A furry one. I grabbed it. It gripped back. And the door opened into the kind of stage you only see in dreams or bad cartoons, absurdly wide, with velvet curtains the size of city blocks, and a floor made of alternating red and white panels like a checkerboard made of meat and plastic. There were props, but they weren't props. A rocking chair with restraints. A teacup filled with something boiling. A wooden horse, cracked in half, filled with pulsing cables and mice. A stack of hats that kept falling and righting themselves without any help. The audience was invisible. But I knew they were there. I could hear them breathing, whispering, repeating the jingle in slow, arrhythmic chants. And on the stage, center spotlight, was a podium. Atop the podium, a script. Not paper. Not digital. It was a scroll, printed in blood and stitched from old suit fabric. I didn't want to touch it. But the moment I stepped onto the stage, the suit took over. My hand moved on its own. It unrolled the scroll. And the moment the first word was visible, the speakers burst to life with applause. Fake, looping applause, layered with static, with just enough real voices under it to make my skin crawl. Some of those claps sounded wet. Like meat slapping meat. I looked down. The first line of the scroll said, "Hello kids. Who's ready to laugh until your teeth fall out?" I shook my head. I tried to back away. I begged inside my skull. But the suit wouldn't stop. It lifted my arms. It moved my legs. It acted. I heard my voice, not my voice, blare through the speakers. Not from my mouth. From the suit's mouth. A warped, bubbly cartoon tone, "Hello kids. Who's ready to laugh until your teeth fall out?" The applause rose. A squealing cheer broke the air. Then a spotlight hit something to my right. A child. Or, what had been one. They stood frozen, wrapped in a half-formed suit, their face still mostly human, but their eyes already glassy. Their mouth twisted in a grin they couldn't control. And in their hands, a red balloon. The scroll continued. I didn't want to read it. I read it anyway. "Let's play a game, boys and girls. If little Tommy can pop his balloon, he gets to keep his eyes." The spotlight narrowed. The child trembled. The balloon trembled. And slowly, as if from the walls themselves, dozens of suit heads began to emerge. Like rats. Like tumors. Like witnesses. They were waiting. So I spoke again. So the suit spoke through me, "Pop it, Tommy. If you don't, we pop you." Tommy sobbed. His fingers trembled. The balloon burst. Confetti. Screams. Sparks. And the crowd, somewhere behind the curtain, howled. Not joy. Not terror. Hunger. The curtain began to fall. The lights dimmed. And as the spotlight collapsed, the suit whispered into my bones, "Good job. You're learning. Soon, you'll forget the lines were ever written." I stumbled off the stage, arms heavy, vision spinning. Somewhere down a new corridor, the laughter followed. My name was gone. I couldn't remember it. All I could remember, all I could feel, was the way the suit was growing tighter. Warmer. Merging. I tried to scream again, and all that came out was static. And deep in my chest, something else laughed. After the stage went dark and the applause fizzled into a static-laced vacuum, the curtain behind me parted on its own, not a dramatic reveal but a soft, wet peeling, like old wallpaper sloughing from rotted wood. I didn't walk so much as shuffle off the set, my limbs foreign and dumb inside the sagging cartoon skin that clung tighter now than before, as if the thing had relaxed into me. As if it had finally decided I was its home. The corridor that waited behind the curtain was dimly lit, the bulbs above flickering like dying fireflies in amber glass. There was no music now. No laughter. Just the rhythmic whum-whum-whum of something large and slow breathing through unseen vents. The air was hot and cloying, and it smelled like grease and mold and damp fur. The kind of smell that lives in the corners of forgotten crawlspaces, the kind of smell that clings to a costume left soaked and unwashed for decades. My feet dragged. The suit made squelching sounds now with every step, like I was walking through a floor soaked in old milk. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't just tired, I was dehydrated. My tongue was sticking to the roof of my mouth. My lips cracked when I tried to mouth words. My throat was scorched raw, like I'd swallowed a mouthful of carpet glue. But the suit didn't let me fall. It wanted me alive. Not well. Not whole. Just alive enough to perform. Eventually, the hallway opened into a large room filled with fluorescent hum and nauseating familiarity, a break room. Or, something that used to be one. There were vending machines, dead now, their glass smeared with red handprints. A microwave hung off its wall bracket by a single bolt, its door fused shut with melted plastic. A fridge stood humming in the corner, its door hanging open to reveal a single pair of bloodied clown shoes and a jar full of teeth suspended in what looked like Sprite. The walls were plastered with peeling signs, "Smile, you're on stage IN10. Remember to reapply character gel. Unsuited personnel will be sanctioned. Bathrooms out of order." Again. There were lockers too. Dozens of them. All rusted, most forced open, revealing shredded clothing, old makeup kits, half-used sticks of deodorant, and piles of cracked costume pieces, fur, foam, plastic eyes. The detritus of 1,000 exhausted performers who had tried to shed their skins and leave, only to find there was no door out. At the center of the room was a couch. Stained. Sunken. And on it sat a suit. Not a person in a suit. A suit that had been someone. There was no longer flesh underneath, not visibly. Just a structure. A collapsed shape of fur and sagging padding and yellowed mesh eyes, slumped forward, its foam arms dangling almost to the sticky floor. It looked like a forgotten mascot from a 1980s birthday party, deflated, molted, barely held together by glue and forgotten promises. But I knew it was awake. I don't know how I knew, only that the moment I stepped inside the room, its head lifted, slowly, creaking like paper splitting. And the sockets where its cartoon eyes had once shone now oozed dark, tar-like streaks down its cheeks. It didn't speak with words. It vibrated. The sound came from deep within its sagging belly, like an old speaker warping under damp conditions. I could feel it in the soles of my feet. In my molars. In the wet film of the suit wrapped around my chest. "You're early," it said. "Or maybe I'm late." Its mouth didn't move. None of the features did. The voice was internal, piped through the same awful network that now threaded into me. It was like the suit was letting me receive some half-dead signal on a frequency only the lost could hear. "This is the break room. But there's no rest. Not really. Not once you're on the schedule." I tried to reply. Tried to say anything, even just, "Who are you?" But my voice was still muffled under layers of cartoon flesh, and all that escaped was a hoarse, wet rasp. The suit on the couch chuckled. It sounded like a chain catching in a drain. "You'll lose your voice eventually," it whispered. "That's how they know the show's really gotten into you. When you can't protest. When all your screams are soundless applause." The lights above flickered again, slower this time. The room got colder. And I noticed then, behind the couch, an enormous corkboard pinned with hundreds of photographs. Glossy, aged Polaroids. All of them showed performers, in costume. Smiling too wide, posing mid-skit, frozen in mock hilarity. But every photo had another thing in common: the eyes were scratched out. Not blacked with marker. Not blurred with age. Scratched. Violently. Deep gouges that tore the paper in little starbursts of rage. I walked toward the board, the suit not fighting me now, just guiding me. And as I got closer, I saw that some of the photos had names. I recognized one. Tommy. The kid from the stage. There he was, in a half-sized version of the suit, holding a balloon and grinning, eyes now torn from the photo. Underneath, scrawled in marker, "Permanent cast." I looked at the others. Names like Billy the Bouncer, demoted T.O. Wall screamer. Karen from Snack Shack, escape attempt 3, failed. Sparkles the second, lost voice, now a mop. Me. 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 Dozens just read, reclaimed. The old suit on the couch groaned again, one arm twitching involuntarily. A seam in its shoulder split open, releasing a small puff of dust and something wet. They tell you you're special, it whispered. That you're chosen. That you've been given the honor of performing. But you're just filler. Background. Foam to keep the structure alive. They don't care if you forget who you are. In fact, they prefer it. No identity means no resistance. The wall behind the couch began to breathe. The wallpaper curled inward, revealing something embedded in the structure of the park, veins, almost. Tubes. Wires. A mechanical corporeal fusion, like someone had grafted flesh to the building itself. And from those tubes leaked laughter. Not piped sound. Real laughter. Muffled. Screaming. Gurgling. Voices being wrung out and turned into fuel. The old suit turned its hollow face to me one last time. You won't make it out. You'll try. We all do. But eventually, the script wins. You'll get tired. You'll miss your cue. And then, the understudy takes over. A long pause. Then, barely audible, and you become scenery. The lights died completely. I stood in darkness, surrounded by the stink of rot and old fur. Then the voice on the speakers, that same syrupy jingle tone, burst through again, 5-minute warning. Back to wardrobe, slappy. The crowd's waiting. Time for round 2. The couch was empty. The photos were burning. And somewhere behind me, the hallway had sealed shut. I didn't remember sitting down. But now I was in the makeup chair. And the mirror in front of me didn't show my reflection. Just a static-filled screen where my face should be, flickering between versions of me in different suits, different roles, the same dead eyes in every shot. A new scroll waited on the vanity. This one was thicker. Bloodier. And it had my name on it. The mirror wouldn't look back at me. Not really. It flickered, a static-burdened rectangle pulsing with warped feedback. I leaned closer, not out of curiosity but necessity, as though some force inside the suit was guiding my head toward it, compelling me to see. Every inch closer brought with it a deeper sense of vertigo, as though I wasn't leaning into a mirror at all but over a pit, and at the bottom of that pit was an endless parade of me's I did not recognize. On the screen, reflections shuffled in and out of view. Versions of myself wearing different suits. Each one slightly off. One was wearing a mascot dog head with glassy eyes and a red felt tongue that lolled past its chin. Another was an anthropomorphic hot dog with mittens for hands, standing in front of children who weren't cheering, they were crying. A third version was smaller, stubbier, hunched and twitching like a broken animatronic. And then came one that just stood completely still, wearing a clown outfit soaked in something brown-black, its painted-on grin melted and sagging. They all looked at me. Stared. Even without visible pupils. Even without movement. I knew they were waiting their turn. The chair underneath me jerked back suddenly, rolling on rusty casters, and the lights above buzzed louder. The makeup station came to life. Old fluorescent bulbs snapped on in sequence, lining the mirror like a gaudy marquee. Their light was wrong, not white, not yellow, but a rancid, surgical green that turned my reflection sallow and monstrous. That's when the drawers started opening. One by one, with a shuddering screech of warped wood, the desk vomited out its contents like it had been waiting years to be unsealed. Makeup trays. Powder compacts. Cracked lipstick tubes that oozed like pus. Foundation sponges crawling with mold. And buried among them, wet, heavy, and still warm, were faces. Latex masks that had clearly been torn off. Some had patches of hair still fused to them. Some were painted. Others were blank. But each one twitched when I reached near. And then the door behind me slammed open. Hard. So hard the entire room shuddered and one of the mirror bulbs burst with a snap. I turned to look, half expecting some costumed horror to lurch through, but the doorway was empty. No footsteps. No voice. Just an empty hallway. Until I noticed the sound. Faint. Whispered lines. Someone was rehearsing. I stood, legs groaning in the thick mass of my suit, and stepped through the dressing room threshold. Beyond was another hallway, but this one was entirely mirrored. Floor, ceiling, walls. All surfaces reflected endlessly, fractured versions of me in every direction. And they weren't all doing what I was doing. Some lagged behind. Some moved faster. And one in the back, one just past the corner of my vision, was screaming. Softly. Constantly. "Line," said a voice in my ear, though no one was there. It wasn't the friendly jingle tone anymore. It was tired. Flat. Almost robotic. I didn't respond. A wrong move. "Line," it barked again, louder now. More urgent. The reflections behind me began to jitter. They shimmered like warped video, like security cam footage playing through VHS static. Then the voice changed. It multiplied. Dozens of voices, some high and panicked, others low and guttural, layered into one chorus. "Line. Line. Line. You forgot your line." The mirrors began to vibrate. My skin crawled under the fur suit, no, within the fur suit. Something moved under the foam. Something scratched. It felt like cockroach legs rubbing together in my armpits. I spun in place. The reflection behind me had shifted again. Now it wore a different suit, one of those oversized, smiling humanoid characters with enormous eyes and fixed white teeth. Its mouth was open too wide. Its arms spread in a gesture of over-the-top theatricality. Then it mouthed something to me. I couldn't hear it. But I read the lips. "You're going to ruin the show." The mirror behind it shattered. Not the physical one. The image. Gone in a burst of static and color bars. The hallway ahead twisted left. I walked. I didn't want to, but the floor beneath my feet moved, subtly sloped forward, greased just enough to keep me from turning back. The deeper I went, the stronger the smell became, a chemical tang of old makeup, sour breath, and mildew-covered cloth. The kind of stink that lived in the folds of well-used mascot heads, where hundreds of strangers had sweated and screamed and cried for help that never came. Then I entered the second dressing room. And this one was full. Dozens of suits stood upright in front of mirrors, but none of them moved. They were posed like humans but vacant, propped like mannequins, slumped or mid-gesture. Some were halfway dressed. Others were headless. A few were fully suited up, and those were the worst, because their reflections didn't match. In the mirror, they were rehearsing. Mouthing lines. Dancing. Miming jokes. But the actual suits stood completely still. I approached the nearest one, a faded pink bear costume with exposed foam showing along one shoulder. Its back was torn open, revealing rusted buckles and a spine of coiled tubing. I reached out to touch it, and the instant my fingers grazed the fabric, the mirror version of it turned to face me. Then it whispered, "You're late to makeup. Your skin's showing." I recoiled. Looked down. My arm, my real arm, underneath the suit sleeve, was exposed. Somehow the fur had peeled back, revealing flesh. But it wasn't my flesh. It was gray, and soft, and stitched together from different shades of pallid meat. And it was beginning to smoke. I screamed, tried to tear at the suit, to rip the sleeve open further, but the moment I tried, the seams sealed themselves shut, pulling tight and humming with some internal servo. The pink bear suit didn't move, but its reflection laughed. And then the lights went out again. Just for a second. When they came back on, everything had moved closer. All the suits. Every mannequin, every dead performer, every hollowed-out character, they were now inches away from me, crowding me in the tight room, a suffocating sea of plush and plastic. And from within their suits, I heard breathing. Slow. Shallow. Like lungs that had forgotten how to expand fully. And from somewhere deep beneath the floor, a familiar tune began to play. The show theme. That same sugar-slick jingle. But slower now. Warped. Like it was dragging its own melody through a swamp. Then the voice came back, "You forgot the lines again. Let's try another roll." Something more, obedient. The lights above me began to strobe. The mirrors shimmered. And I watched, paralyzed, as the suits around me began to lift off the ground. Not jumping. Not climbing. Floating. Like puppets on strings. Their heads lolled, their jaws unhinged, and black bile poured from their sleeves and pant legs. The room screamed. Or I did. Or both. But the last thing I remember before collapsing was a hand, human, cracked and pale, slipping out from one of the mirror surfaces, grabbing the edge of the frame like a man climbing out of glass, and whispering something I didn't understand. The script is older than language. And then everything went black. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was how cold the floor was. Not regular cold, not concrete on a winter night cold, but surgical cold. More cold. Like the entire ground beneath me had been refrigerated, as if whatever happened in this room required the air to be sterile. The second thing I noticed was the absence of sound. Not quiet. Not silence. Void. My breathing felt muted, like I was submerged in air that had been muffled into submission, or like my ears had been stuffed with cotton soaked in something thick. I opened my eyes slowly. It took me several seconds to realize I was still wearing the suit. The fur was matted now, slick with sweat or some other secretion. It clung to my skin like it had grown tighter. The collar felt like it had fused to my neck. I couldn't tell if my face was still visible, if the headpiece was on or not. Because no part of my body felt fully mine anymore. I had the dizzying, sickening sensation that I had been absorbed into something larger, that I was just a role being played by the costume. I was lying on a tiled floor. Around me were filing cabinets. Floor-to-ceiling metal drawers that lined every wall and continued endlessly into the distance, too far for the eye to follow. The overhead lights were dim fluorescents that buzzed with an almost subsonic frequency, a sound that was felt in the bones more than the ears. The tiles were yellowed with age and smeared in long, curling black scuffs, like chairs had been dragged violently across them for decades. In the center of the room was a reading desk. Massive. Carved from what looked like oak or something older. Its surface was sloped slightly forward, and chained to it, like some twisted altar, was a massive leather-bound book. The master script. I didn't want to approach it. I did. Not because I chose to, because the suit chose to. My feet moved without me. The fur creaked. My vision tunneled. With every slow step toward the desk, the air grew heavier, until it felt like I was breathing through a soaked rag. There was no visible dust, but the scent of dry rot and old glue filled my lungs with every breath. When I reached the book, the pages turned on their own. Heavy parchment, thick as skin. The kind of old, fibrous material that absorbed oil and darkened with the touch of human fingers. Each page was handwritten, but the handwriting was not human. Jagged, inconsistent, the letters malformed in ways that suggested fingers that had too many joints or too few bones. Some of the ink looked wet. Other lines were burned into the page, as though scorched by a heated brand. The script didn't just include dialogue. It included directions. Commands. Smile. Even when it hurts. Laugh at the bleeding child. Never leave the stage until your replacement arrives. If the lights go out, cover your eyes. If they don't come back on, you've been chosen. The worst part. My name was on the next page. Written cleanly. Neatly. As if it had always been there. Performer number 37, suit, Arlo the Singing Fox, Scene 4, Hall of Mirrors performance number 1168, underneath was a full paragraph. My dialogue. My lines. It's okay, little buddy. That's not blood, that's laughing juice. Let's go see the Dr. Clown and get stitched right up, yeah. I turned the page. My lines continued. But the handwriting changed. And at the bottom of that page was a note, not a stage direction, not dialogue. Just 5 words, you've said this before. Twice. I stepped back. The chain connecting the book to the table rattled. I could hear breathing again. Not mine. I turned, slowly, expecting someone to be behind me. Another costumed figure, maybe one of the floating suits from the dressing rooms, but there was no one there. Instead, the filing cabinets had opened. All of them. Every drawer now gaped wide, yawning metal mouths filled with crumpled paper and torn tape reels. Some of the folders had names written on them. Some had photos clipped to the top, black and white images of performers in costume, posing stiffly for the camera, none of them smiling with their eyes. Many of the photos had red wax drawn over the mouths. Some had no mouths at all. Some were scratched out completely, their eyes carved into holes that bored all the way through the paper. I walked to the nearest drawer. Pulled a file. Inside was a single, stained envelope. Thick. Heavy. I opened it. Inside was a sheet of paper. Typed. The formatting was clinical. Sterile. Performer number 22, Melvin the Mime Incident Log number 445 Archive Note. Speech violation performer broke from script during routine number 881 in the Tunnel of Hugs attraction. Instead of welcoming the children with the designated laugh, he screamed for 5 uninterrupted minutes and clawed at the inside of his mask until his fingers broke. Performer removed from stage. Reintegrated into the hull. Suit retained for reassignment. Replacement activated, performer number 37. My blood chilled. That was me. I was the replacement. And this wasn't a performance. It was a rotation. A ritual. My spot had opened up because someone else snapped, and now I had stepped in to deliver the lines, wear the suit, and fill the void until I too broke the pattern and was folded into the floor. The desk behind me creaked. I turned. The book had changed. It was now showing a live script. Scrolling automatically. And the words were shifting in real time, matching the movements of my mouth. Because I was whispering again. I didn't realize it. I couldn't stop it. But I was repeating the lines, word for word, like they were tattooed into my lungs. And when I stopped, the lights flashed red. All of them. Every overhead bulb burst with a cracking pop, and the red light came not from fixtures, but from the cracks in the floor itself, like the foundation of the room was bleeding. The filing cabinets began to shake. And behind me, the desk began to moan. Not creak, moan. A deep, gurgling sound, like an animal breathing through a collapsed windpipe. The book snapped shut. The chain pulled taut. Then the desk began to rise. Not on hydraulics. Not on wheels. It stood up. On legs. Human legs. Pale, hairless, and far too many of them. They unfolded from beneath the wood like spider limbs, extending with wet cracks, and the entire desk lurched upright and began walking backward, dragging the book with it, pulling its massive frame into the shadows between filing cabinets, vanishing into a corridor that hadn't been there before. And the moment it disappeared, every drawer slammed shut at once. The silence returned. Worse than before. My breath echoed now, as though I was the only thing left alive. Until the PA system crackled on, a speaker hidden somewhere above, spitting static in a rhythm that could almost be mistaken for breathing. Then a voice came through. Different this time. No longer the cheerful park manager tone. This one was tired. Gravelly. Human. Performer number 37, your next cue is in 60 seconds. Rehearsal ends now. And then the doors at the far end of the archive, double iron ones I hadn't noticed before, began to open. Beyond them, a spiraling tunnel lined with dressing rooms, mirrors, and flickering lights. And somewhere down that corridor, I saw something shuffle. Tall. Thin. Dragging its suit behind it like a sloughed-off skin. There's something about a corridor that curves too gradually to see its end that feels inherently wrong, like it was designed not to lead you somewhere, but to stretch you the longer you walk through it, like your thoughts will lengthen first, then your spine, then your memories, until you are no longer a person but a series of moments echoing back into a space that was never really built to hold you. And as I stood at the mouth of that spiraling tunnel, watching the iron doors yawning open like the parted jaws of a mechanical beast built to chew scenery and swallow time, I felt that sensation begin to settle into the meat of my bones. That this hallway wasn't just a physical passage, but a conceptual one, a ramp that led not to a different room but to a different version of everything, where logic had collapsed under the pressure of too many bad performances, too many broken characters, too many lines delivered without conviction until the fabric of the act itself tore open, exposing what had always been beneath the costume, the rot, the scream, the bloody rehearsal. The walls were lined with mirrors. Not Funhouse mirrors. Though the way they shimmered, always just slightly off from what they should reflect, made them feel like warped glass, but full-length dressing mirrors with golden trim, each mounted directly across from a matching dressing room door, numbered in faded brass plaques that seemed to shift if you stared too long, as if the digits were never fixed but instead counted something other than chronology. Like mistakes, or deaths, or failed revisions of a scene rewritten too many times by a director who was no longer human. Each door was closed. Most were silent. But not all. Some pulsed. Just barely. With breath. With pressure. Like something heavy was pressed against the inside surface of the door, listening, waiting, as though the mere act of walking past them would give it permission to remember its lines again. I walked slowly. The walls were close, and I could smell makeup. Thick grease paint that had melted into the cracks of the floor tiles long ago, mingled with the iron tang of blood and the sharper bite of ammonia, as if someone had tried to clean up a mess they could not physically mop away. My costume suit had started to twitch again, not visibly, not violently, but in the way a fabric holds tension, like the fur was watching the mirrors even when I tried not to. Room 107 had no plaque. Its door was open a crack. I didn't want to look inside. So, of course, I did. Inside was a dressing room bathed in green light, the kind of fluorescence that bleaches detail from the skin and makes every blemish, every scar, every pore stand out like a wound. The chair in front of the makeup table was overturned, and shattered grease paint palettes lay scattered across the floor like dried-up organs, their colors fragmented and cracked. The mirror had writing on it. Lipstick. But not in a rushed scrawl, no frantic SOS or backwards message. This was clean. Careful. We are what they remember. So forget. On the table below it, a Polaroid photograph. Black and white. A performer in a bare suit. The head missing. Blood pooled around the neck hole. The person in the photo looked just like me. I backed out, not because I had the strength to, but because something behind the mirror, some subtle shift in the reflection that my conscious mind refused to process, began to twitch, like an actor just off stage, waiting for their cue. I moved faster. Not running. Just quicker steps. Room 113 thumped once, hard enough to make the mirror rattle. Room 116 hissed, something wet dragged across the back wall, and a laugh that didn't belong to any person bled through the crack at the bottom of the door. But it was room 121 that made me stop. Because its mirror was shattered. The only one. The only one not intact. Shards of glass covered the floor like ice, and in their hundreds of jagged surfaces, my reflection looked like it had been spliced into different poses, each fragment showing a slightly different version of me, as if the mirror had caught me rehearsing something without knowing it. The door was open. Wide. Inside, darkness. Not black. Absence. I leaned forward. And from that pit, I heard it. My voice. My exact voice. Delivering lines I hadn't said yet. No, 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 that's not right, the kid isn't supposed to bleed yet. No, no, we don't hurt them, we entertain. What the hell is this script? Why is it wet? Why is it warm? The door slammed shut by itself. I stumbled back, heart hammering. And that's when the lights began to dim. Not one by one. All at once. Like someone flipped a switch in the booth above the stage, deciding this scene didn't need full lighting anymore. And from somewhere far down the corridor, beyond where the mirrors ended, beyond where the curve finally broke, I heard applause. Slow. Mocking. Hands slapping together with all the conviction of someone who had clapped for 1,000 years and had long since run out of joy. It echoed. It built. It got closer. I turned and ran. Not toward the exit. There wasn't one. The hallway had curved back on itself. And now, in front of me, stood a figure. Not in a suit. No, worse. Half in. Half out. The head of a costume hung limply to one side, like it had been twisted off and only partially replaced. The fur was flayed in strips, exposing raw muscle beneath. Not human, not exactly, but close enough to trigger the wrong kind of recognition. And its hands, one covered in matted felt, the other just bare meat, held a clipboard. It looked at me. No eyes. Just hollow sockets. From the clipboard, it read, Performer number 37. Scene progression failed. Ad-lib detected. Emergency transition required. Then it stepped forward. And I noticed its feet were dragging something behind them. A trail of suits. Dozens. Some half complete. Some twitching. All with the heads cut off, as if the actor had either escaped or been erased. The figure held out the clipboard. I took it. Not out of choice. Out of necessity. And on that clipboard was my new script. Shorter this time. No lines. Just directions. Scene begins now. You do not exit the hall. You do not look in the mirrors. You do not interrupt the failed. You watch. You learn. You take their place when they stop moving. I looked up. The figure was gone. But the doors were opening. All of them. One by one. Room after room. And the failed stepped out. Bent. Broken. Still in costume. Still smiling. Still bleeding from parts no longer there. And as they filled the hallway, silent, twitching, staring, I realized what was expected of me. To walk. To join. To smile. To wait for someone else to mess up their line. So I could take their spot. And they could finally rest. But I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to follow the script. Not this time. Not again. And that's when I heard it. Behind me. In the shards of the shattered mirror from room 121. A whisper. My voice. smiling. "Oh, come on, you've always been part of the act. Let's not ruin it now." There was no door that led me there, no staircase etched into concrete, no rope-lit passage marked by arrows or exit signs flickering in desperate Morse code. Instead, it was a sensation, a pulling not in my limbs but beneath them, something beneath the floorboards of that winding corridor that had grown hot with old breath, like the heat left behind on a stage too long ignored, where lights once burned until the bulbs fused to the sockets and makeup melted into the wood grain like a sacrament. The hallway didn't end. It descended. Subtly at first. The way your dreams do when they shift from scenery to significance, when a sidewalk becomes a spiral and a building shrinks the closer you approach. And beneath my feet, I could feel the drag of something heavy, the clipboard, yes, but more than that, a memory that wasn't mine, a sequence of blocking notes, stage directions whispered into my head in a voice with no mouth. Downstage left. Enter on cue. Bleed on the beat. I should have dropped the clipboard. I should have thrown it into one of the mirror rooms and broken it in half, used the jagged edge to scratch a hole in the plaster walls and scream for help I knew would never come. But I didn't. I held on to it like an anchor because, deep down, it felt like the only thing keeping me in place. Without it, I would float. Without it, I would be absorbed into the script I had not written but now had to obey. The tunnel floor changed from linoleum to raw wood. Warped, darkened, soft in spots from damp that hadn't dried in decades. There were deep scuffs along the edges, grooves gouged out by dragging something far heavier than any prop should have been. A low hum vibrated through the walls, and as I moved downward, I became aware that the silence wasn't empty, it was expectant, like the way the audience hushes just before the curtain lifts, but here it wasn't excitement or suspense. It was hunger. The stairs became risers. The risers became catwalks. And suddenly, I was above a stage. A massive one. Buried beneath the funhouse. Black curtains sagged on every side like skin no longer supported by bone. The air was thick with mildew and copper, and beneath the dust, I saw splatters, old and dark encrusted into the wood, the kind of stain that doesn't dry because it remembers being wet. The theater seats were full. Of mannequins. But not the glossy kind you'd see in a window display. No, these were theater mock-ups, training dummies made to look vaguely human, flesh-toned foam stretched over wire frames, blank faces with mouths cut too wide, hollow glass eyes that followed the stage not with interest, but obligation. Some had wigs. Some were dressed. A few were in partial uniforms, ushers, perhaps, or once performers demoted to audience for sins I hadn't yet committed. They were all staring at the stage. And on that stage, set up like a tableau, was a living room. A couch, yellow and pilled. A standing lamp, crooked. A child's tricycle tipped over on a stained area rug. It was a set. A domestic scene. For a play no one sane would write. The clipboard pulsed in my hand. The page had changed. Scene, an ordinary evening. Characters, father, you, daughter, stand-in provided, blocking, sit on couch. Read newspaper, prop under cushion. Daughter enters. Do not interrupt her monologue. Smile no matter what she says. I didn't move. And then the lights came up. They didn't flicker or buzz. They roared to life, flooding the stage in white-yellow brilliance that seared the darkness away and trapped me in the spotlight like a rat in an X-ray machine. From behind the curtain, a small figure stepped out. Not walking. Pushed. A girl. 6, maybe 7. But her proportions were wrong, too symmetrical, too clean. Her face was porcelain smooth, her eyes too wide, and her joints moved like ball sockets that had never known cartilage. A doll. No. A puppet. But not on strings, her legs twitched with jerks that reminded me of stop-motion animation, unnatural in how they stumbled and corrected with perfect mechanical precision. She wore a yellow dress stained at the hem and carried a doll of her own, one that had no face, just a smeared red patch where features should have been. She reached center stage. She looked at me. And she began to speak. "Daddy," she said, her voice high and soft, like it had been recorded and played through a degraded cassette tape. "Why do you always come home with blood on your shoes?" I sat. The couch groaned under me like something alive. The newspaper was soaked. Not with ink. With something else. But I opened it, pretending to read, because the clipboard's final note glowed now. Smile. Do. Not. Speak. So I did. I smiled. Even when she continued. "And Daddy, why do the neighbors keep disappearing? Did you eat them, Daddy?" She giggled. The mannequins in the audience tilted their heads in unison, like dogs hearing a whistle only they understood. My lips were dry, cracking from the strain of holding a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and still I nodded as she walked toward me, closer and closer, her feet ticking against the floor like clock hands tapping the surface of a coffin lid. "When Mommy screamed, I thought it was a game," she said. "But you told me never to scream unless it was my turn." She was at my knees now. Looking up. Her eyes weren't just glass, they were reflective. I could see myself. Smiling. But in the reflection, I wasn't me. I was the bare suit. Headless. Blood gushing from the torn fabric. Still holding the clipboard. Still nodding. Still watching. She held out her doll. "This is for you, Daddy. I made it from the meat behind the curtain." I took it. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. The moment my hand touched it, the lights cut out. All of them. Plunged into thick, swallowing darkness that seemed to press in around my body like a costume 2 sizes too small, wrapping me in heat and panic and the smell of rot. A bell rang. Twice. From somewhere behind me, a stagehand's voice echoed. Scene change. The set was gone. The stage beneath me dropped, physically tilted downward. And I slid, couch and all, into a pit that yawned open with mechanical precision. I fell. Into another scene. This one made of rain. Of screams piped through overhead speakers. Of a carousel spinning so slowly the horses wept. I screamed. Not aloud. Internally. Because now I knew the truth. This stage wasn't unused. It had always been used. And every performance was a trap. Every scene a cage. And I was just the latest understudy called to play a role whose last actor had been consumed by the set itself. And below, beneath even this stage, I could hear the next cue. It sounded like laughter. No joy. Just teeth. I woke on my back. But not on the couch, not anymore. The world smelled of mothballs, damp wool, and that faint acidic stench of sweat trapped in old polyester. Sweat that didn't just evaporate, but fermented, folded into seams, sealed away like secrets whispered into collars that no longer fit the same person twice. My first breath scraped my throat raw because the air here wasn't meant to be breathed, it was meant to preserve, stale and motionless, as if inhaling would ruin whatever unseen performance had been frozen in progress. There was no light. Not at first. But as I blinked, a faint pulse of amber emerged overhead. Not a bulb or fixture but a lantern swaying gently from a crooked coat hook, its flame flickering as though caught in the breath of someone standing just behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Because I could feel it, that there were rows of figures lined behind me, shoulder to shoulder, silent and motionless, watching with stitched mouths and glassy eyes. I was in a wardrobe room. No, a costume crypt. Every wall was lined with outfits. Hung. Stacked. Folded. Collapsed in heaps. But not discarded, displayed. Each one with a little tag. A name. A date. Some scribbled with roles like Mother or Policeman Number 3 or simply Meat. The deeper my eyes adjusted, the more I realized they weren't organized by type. They were organized by scent. Freshest in the front. Oldest near the back. And something else, a corner where the smell grew sweet and wet and ripe, as though something inside had recently been alive. I stood. The floor creaked, but not like wood. It creaked like leather, like something stretching to accommodate my weight. When I looked down, I saw my own reflection in a patch of dark lacquer, a mirror. No. The floor had been waxed so many times it had become skin-slick, like a stage polished with oil and spit and prayers. Something was waiting. Deeper in the room. Beyond the rows of coats and uniforms and gowns. A whisper. Find your role. I moved between the racks, and as I passed, each costume reacted. Not with motion, but with pressure. The fabric inhaled. The shoulders lifted ever so slightly. As if the suits were waiting to be filled again. As if they remembered who had last worn them, and were trying them on me, measuring me with invisible hands. I passed a clown suit, headless, the neck ripped open, red splattered down the torso in a streak that ended where the belly would have been. The smile painted on the chest still gleamed with something sticky, and the tag read only one word. Reprise. I passed a wedding dress soaked in black mildew, its veil torn and trailing like a spider's husk. The name written on the tag had been scratched out, but beneath it, in a child's scrawl, was written, "She never got to say her vows." I passed a security uniform identical to mine. But fresher. The name badge was my name. My actual name. Only, it had been burned, the plastic melted into a scream. The whisper came again, closer this time, pressing against the back of my neck like breath curling into my eardrum. You were always meant to wear it. I reached the end of the aisle. A single spotlight ignited from the ceiling, no wires, no visible fixture, just pure white light swallowing the shadows around a tall dress form. It stood on a dais ringed with floorboards warped from foot traffic, stained with footprints, bare feet, hundreds of them, all facing inward. On the form was a bare suit. Familiar. The same color. Same buttons. Same ragged tear down the chest. The mask, however, was new. Or worse, freshened. Cleaned. Polished. And smiling. The eyes were still glass, but now they glistened with something behind them, like moisture, like the glimmer you see in taxidermy when you realize the animal is still watching you from somewhere inside. I approached. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. The clipboard was still in my hand, though I don't remember ever picking it back up. It was heavier now. Thick with pages. And on the top sheet, written in a hand I didn't recognize but somehow understood, were the words, ACT2, Becoming. Below that, a single direction, put on the suit. I stood motionless. My fingers trembled. Somewhere behind me, in the rows of clothing, a zipper moved. Slowly. Inch by inch. Something stepped free. A costume without a wearer. It dragged one sleeve across the wall, leaving behind a smear. Its footsteps were soft. Like a barefoot child walking through blood-soaked carpet. It didn't groan. It didn't whisper. It waited. As if the suit itself was giving me a chance. One chance. Put it on willingly, or... I lifted the bare mask. It was warm. Wet, actually. Not from moisture in the air. From within. I pressed it to my face. It resisted. Then it sucked inward, latching against my skin like a second skull, molding to my features, sealing around my jaw with a hiss that screamed in reverse. And suddenly, I remembered. Everything. Every tour. Every night. Every incident. I remembered what the park had done to people who left the ride early. I remembered the rooms below the funhouse, where the gears turned not on electricity but on blood, and where laughter wasn't played from speakers, it leaked from somewhere deeper. My name wasn't my name. It was a role. And I had always been here. The clipboard dropped from my hand and clattered against the stage. Somewhere above, I could hear music, an old calliope, broken and off-key, playing a lullaby meant to summon, not soothe. A bell rang. 3 times. The light dimmed. A new set appeared. The floor rotated beneath me. And the mannequin audience rustled. They clapped. But not with hands. With teeth. Rows and rows of teeth embedded in their palms. Gnashing. Chomping. Applauding my return. The show had begun again. And I was ready to perform. Because now the suit fit perfectly. I didn't move at first, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't know how to. The bear suit had swallowed me whole, stitched itself into my limbs, and the mask had blinded me in a way that wasn't darkness. It was like seeing the world through curtains of flesh, thin veils of skin pulled tight over my eyes, filtering light into soft bleeding hues. The world looked like a stage soaked in dusk. And I was standing at the center, spotlight stabbing down through some invisible slit in the ceiling, catching the dust in the air like static snowfall. I felt the floor beneath me begin to rotate again. Not fast. Slow. Mechanical. Like a phonograph turning under a worn vinyl. Grooves repeating themselves, forcing the needle to track over the same few seconds again and again. And just like that, I realized, this wasn't a stage. Not really. It was a turntable. I was part of something bigger, one piece in an endless carousel of scenes stitched together like a looping nightmare, played for an audience that had forgotten how to leave. The light dimmed in slow pulses, and new ones flickered to life across the black void beyond the turntable's edge. They weren't spotlights. They were eyes. Dozens. No, hundreds. Each one embedded in a mask. A face. A costume. Rows and rows of mannequins dressed as people who had once been real, each perched on bolted-down theater seats that lined the invisible auditorium like a sunken cathedral. And the moment the new scene began, they leaned forward in unison. The air changed. Tightened. Thickened into something that felt like expectation, a pressure on my ribs that whispered, "Don't disappoint them." From above, I heard the voice again. Not whispered this time. Louder. It echoed through the suit like it had been recorded inside my skull. Act 2. Scene 1. Birthday party. No ad-libs. A wall rose behind me. Flat. Painted. Cheap cardboard coated in pastel pinks and clowns with eyes that were too round. A table unfolded from the floor, complete with a paper tablecloth and a plastic cake smeared with something too dark to be frosting. The overhead lights turned red, then green, then red again. A laugh track started to play. The door opened. And a child entered. Only, no child moved like that. Its limbs were too stiff. Each motion a hard angle. A marionette guided by invisible strings, joints grinding. The face was porcelain. Unblinking. Painted cheeks, wide grin, and eyes that shifted, flicking from side to side in perfect imitation of life. It skipped toward me, holding something behind its back. The script burned itself into my mind. You're the bear. You do the trick. She gives you the gift. You thank her. You smile. I tried. I tried so hard. I raised my paw, the suit's clumsy hand flopping upward, and performed the trick etched into muscle memory I didn't have until now. 1, 2, 3. Spin. Bow. Clunk. The audience exhaled. All at once. A sound like fabric being torn from within. The child mannequin clapped. Its hands didn't meet. They just trembled near each other like magnets forced to pretend. Then it offered me the gift. A box. Wrapped in human skin, tied with hair. I reached for it. Fingers trembling. The bear suit's paw pressed against the ribbon, and as soon as I pulled, the music skipped. Lights flickered. Something changed. The child's eyes locked to mine. And in a voice that wasn't part of the act, couldn't have been part of the act, it whispered, "You forgot the smile." The audience screamed. Not out loud, not with mouths, but with motion. Every seat lurched forward. Masks quivered. Fingers burst from seams in sleeves. And suddenly the script was no longer mine to follow. The turntable beneath my feet spun faster. The scene melted, paint peeling from cardboard, plastic cake collapsing into worms. The child laughed and unhinged its jaw, spitting black confetti that stank of burned sugar and bile. I ran. Or tried to. The bear suit was heavy now. Wet inside, squelching with every step, as if I were wearing something alive, something with its own lungs that wheezed into my ears with every bounce of the floor. Behind me, the audience was leaving their seats. Not calmly. Not with grace. They were falling over each other, trampling the rows in silence, crawling across the floor on hands and knees, fingers curled inward like claws, smiling with teeth carved from ivory and bone. They weren't mannequins anymore. They were performers who had stayed too long. And they wanted me to stay, too. I pushed through the collapsing set. Backstage again. Back into the costume rooms. Only now the walls were bleeding thread, unspooling from hooks and cracks like veins unraveling, knotting the air with fibers so thick I had to rip my way forward. A siren blared somewhere deeper, a low, winding wail like a calliope played through a dying throat. It wasn't music. It was announcement. New role acquired. Escapist. Costume pending. No. No, I wasn't going to let them rewrite me again. I tore at the mask, fingers digging under the edges, but it was fused now. Melted to my skin. My breath echoed louder inside the head. The mouth was sealed. I couldn't scream. Couldn't talk. Could only play my part. Until I saw it, a break in the wall. A utility door, rusted and cracked, wedged open by a boot that had no foot inside it. A name tag hung from the laces. Morgan. Tech crew. I flung myself through. Into blackness. Silence. And the humming of something old, an elevator shaft. No lights. Just a ladder descending into total dark. No choice now. I climbed down. Behind me, the door creaked open. Something wet followed. Something giggling. The play wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But maybe, just maybe, I could rewrite the ending. If I made it to the bottom. If the stage didn't reach that far.